On this episode of the Cryptid Crew Podcast, I'd like to welcome on our guest, Sasquatch Researcher, nature lover, and the founder of the Sasquatch Data Project, Terrestrial. Thank you for coming on, Terrestrial.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited.
Yes, I've been looking forward to this one. Tell us, I'll tell you what, we'll just dive right into this. Tell our listeners what got you started or interested in the world of Sasquatch or Bigfoot.
Yeah, so I kind of have a funny story of how it all got started. I was about 5 years old, and I was home from school that day, which was kind of weird. And my dad was also home from work that day, which is also weird. But it was because he was prepping for a colonoscopy. So we were like lounging on the couch all day, and he had always been into like alien shows and like cryptid shows and stuff. So we had been just kind of watching TV all day long. And I remember Sasquatch Legend Meets Science came on the TV, Doug Hychek's documentary, and I saw the Patterson-Gimlin film in that documentary for the first time. And I was like, oh my God, this is the craziest, but also like the most magnificent thing I've ever seen. And from then on, I've just been really interested in the subject and trying to learn all I can about it.
Right. Yeah, that's I guess for you to get started, yeah, the Patterson-Gimlin film, same here. It's basically what got me interested in it as well.
Yeah, it's that film in itself, I know it's been under a lot of scrutiny and people have a lot to say about it, but it's just crazy that after all this time, you know, no one's ever really been able to debunk it or say for sure that it's hoaxed or something. So, yeah, that's definitely my go-to piece of footage.
Exactly. Yeah, it's hard to, I believe I saw a documentary where I believe it's Bill Munn, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
He was a costume specialist, I believe, in Hollywood back in the late 60s or mid 60s, early 70s. And he had talked in that particular documentary about there was no technology of that sort for a suit to look like that back then.
Yeah, he has a really interesting book. I have it on my bookshelf. It's called, well, I can't find it quickly enough, but he has a book where he goes into like the details of like the costumes that they had. And I've always heard too, like the Planet of the Apes movie came out like a few years after the PG film, and those were apparently like top of the line costumes that they were using, and they just look, you know, just
they look nothing.
Yeah, nothing
right.
like Patty.
Nothing like Patty. No, that was so. She was so fluid and so natural. You could tell it was really, to me, it was organic. You know, not someone in the costume.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this. Tell the listeners, if you don't mind, and myself, how long have you been doing the research? And I know I have looked at some of your data that you have provided, you know, posted on Instagram and so forth, and it is very thorough.
Yeah, I try to have a really, I guess like data-driven, science-backed approach to the subject. I've been working on the Sasquatch Data Project since 2023, but I really ramped up like my focus on it within the last 6 months or so. So I've gotten most of my work done, honestly, within like the last 6 months.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I come from a sciencey background, so I'm really trying to let the data kind of guide my opinions and ideas of what Sasquatches are, how they behave, what they look like, instead of just kind of, I don't know, coming up with ideas and then just sticking with it. You know, I like to have numbers and data to back up what I think.
Absolutely. Tell me this: how long does it take you to just say, for example, I noticed you had Alabama, Montana, I believe, was another state. How long does it take you to research a state?
Yeah, so it depends on the number of reports. So right now I'm just focusing on the BFRO reports, though I have started looking and parsing through the North American Wood Ape Conservancy reports as well, just to have some like data diversity, and it helps with statistical analysis and stuff if you kind of like diversify your sources. But anyway, it depends on the amount of reports. Right now I'm trying to do like 100 reports every month. Each report itself takes me anywhere from like 6 to 10 minutes to get through. So it takes quite a bit of time because I'm pretty much manually reading every single report and then shoving it into my giant data set.
Right.
And I'm using like AI to help a little bit, but the problem with that is they're like ChatGPT and Claude AI, they're not consistent with how they like parse through the report. They're not consistent with the data that they actually grab or don't grab. So I still have to like manually comb through everything. So yeah, I try to shoot for like 80 to 100 reports a month. Sometimes I hit it, sometimes I do more, sometimes I do less. But yeah, it takes quite a bit of time.
Right. Yeah, that's quite a bit. And there's a lot of, I've read some of those reports, online that they have, and it's quite a bit of information on some of those reports to go through. Yes.
Yeah. A lot of it is really just like, honestly, most of the reports that I read, the bulk of the information is in 1 or 2 sentences. And then the rest is like, basically like what's happening leading up to the report and what happens after like the encounter with the Sasquatch. So it's kind of interesting. Like it's a lot of work to go through everything and figure out, okay, what's going to be helpful and what is not. So yeah, it takes quite a bit of time.
All right. Let me ask you this. What, going through the reports, what are some of the reports, that stick out to you the most?
There have been a couple. So actually Alabama was one of my favorite states to go through, because they had some of the most interesting and different reports than what the data set as a whole is showing me, especially about like the physical traits of Sasquatches. So there were a few places in Alabama where like white and gray Sasquatch reports were clustered, like in particular areas. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And also there was a really good Class A sighting report in Huntsville. This guy was staying at the Marriott, like hotel over there by the NASA complex in Huntsville. And, apparently there's like I don't know if it's a conservation area or I can't quite remember, some kind of preserve, that like backs up to the hotel, and he saw a Sasquatch, standing by a dumpster, like from his Marriott hotel room. Wow. And he was so freaked out. He ran down to the security people and was like, "Are any of you armed?" And, one of them was, and they went out there and looked around, and by that time it was gone. But, I thought that was a really interesting report.
That's very interesting. I'm assuming it was rummaging through the trash.
Yeah, who knows? It was, we definitely can't say for sure, but to me, that's what it seems like it would be doing, is, going through the trash looking for food. But yeah, he just saw it standing there. And then by the time he actually got down to the ground, it was gone.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting you brought that up about the different colors, because I'm about to do another episode, or not another, but my first episode on the Alabama white thing. And there's been a few reports, and most of them are in North Alabama that I've noticed, that have reported, not saying albino, but, a white colored or light gray colored, bipedal creature.
Yeah, that's really, see, I was not aware of that when I was going through the Alabama reports. I didn't know that was like a thing for Alabama. So that's really interesting. It's really interesting that that's kind of part of the lore of the state.
Sure. Yeah. Those, I believe the first one that I noticed happened, I believe it was 1975.
Oh,
One or
wow.
two
Okay.
in that area, or I say in that area, Blunt County, North Alabama, that area. Let me ask you this, and one of your Instagram posts really, really interested me. And it made total sense, and that is the fear factor. And
Yep.
tell us a little bit how you got to that, and just kind of elaborate on that.
Yeah. So that's kind of been my area of interest lately because after I've gone through over 1,500 reports now at this point, and the fear of the witness is always a main point within the report. Typically, I guess technically not always, but it's typically a main point. Like the witness either brings up how scared they were, how freaked out they were. The follow-up investigation either goes into it. So I was like, there's this thing in psychology. It has many different names, but I call it fear-driven magnification. Basically, when you're super freaked out, you perceive the stimulus as much larger than it actually is. So I had this idea. I'm like, well, we can categorize the different witness fear levels for each of these reports. And I wonder if there's any, correlation between the fear level of the witness and the reported height of the Sasquatch that they encountered. And it turns out there is. As witness fear increases, so does the average height of the Sasquatch, usually. It's also interesting that in the lower fear levels of the witness, the variance of the heights is greater than those in the higher witness fear levels. So the span of the height range that witnesses typically report is larger for these lower fear levels. So that's interesting too. But yeah, that's been kind of my main point of interest. I just released a YouTube video on that. I'm working on a more formal paperish kind of thing to post on my website about it because it's really interesting. And I think it's something that we need to keep in mind when we are talking about Sasquatch characteristics and, trying to interpret what the witness actually saw.
Right. That makes total sense. If you have, especially if someone's alone and they encounter something like that is either in the woods or, hiking or what have you, the fear factor, well, I guess what makes me think that is one episode of Finding Bigfoot, and I'm not sure if you have watched that. I'm sure you have, though.
Oh, I love Finding Bigfoot.
that's probably my favorite out of all of them. But I believe it was a Minnesota episode where a young lady was jogging down a dirt road, and she had looked back, and she claimed that it was 11 or 12 feet tall, And,
yeah.
and I just thought that's no way possible. I'm not saying she's lying, but the study that you have, or the research you've done on the fear factor, makes total sense why she thought it would be bigger than what it was.
Yeah, it's definitely something that we as researchers need to keep in mind because, it's not purely a psychological thing. It's also physical. So when you get scared, and when you feel fear, this structure in your brain called the amygdala basically lights up. It's that's the majority of what it does is process emotions, especially fear. And when that happens, it sends signals back to your visual cortices. And then they further direct perceptual processing. So basically your sense of size and your ability to correctly gauge a size becomes distorted. So it's definitely a thing that, it basically has to happen in a certain percentage of reports. And studies have found that people who are experiencing, elevated levels of fear can perceive the stimulus as anywhere from 17 to 30% larger than it actually is, which is, 30% is wild. That's a huge percentage, especially when you're talking about size. So, yeah, it's a really interesting thing to think about and to keep in mind, because it really does kind of start to explain these more extreme heights that that sometimes get reported from witnesses.
I agree. And I'm assuming what they're focused on, which would be the creature, is magnified. So, as well. So that might make it seem that more extreme to them than what it actually is. But, yeah, makes sense. That's very interesting. When I saw that, I thought, wow, that's you hit the nail on the head with that. So,
yeah,
I'm going to ask you.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. No, I didn't mean to interrupt.
I definitely think it's interesting, because I've had people bring up, I've had some feedback that, yes, it makes sense, but also people are like, well, if the thing is bigger, then wouldn't you be more scared? Because it's, on the larger end of whatever we think Sasquatch heights should be. And I think that's like an interesting thing to touch on too, because to an extent, yeah, like you're probably going to be more freaked out if you're encountering something that's, 10 feet tall versus 7 feet tall, but also, since it is like a psychological, physical thing that happens, we have to keep that in mind.
Right, right.
That is a possibility. I just like to throw that in there too, because that's been probably one of the main, points of feedback that I've gotten on this whole idea. Sure.
Let me transition into something else that you did some research on as well. And I guess it would be more of a question. What is the best time to see a Sasquatch or encounter one?
Yeah, so this is an interesting question, because I guess let me start with talking about the kind of data that we're dealing with, because I think it's really important to address this question, because I get this question a lot. So the type of data that these witness reports from the BFRO and the NAWAC website, it's called presence only. So basically, we only have information on when a Sasquatch was not only just seen, but also reported back to an organization. So we don't necessarily have data on when the Sasquatch wasn't in the area. We don't have data on when, someone did experience something, they just didn't report it. So with presence only data, especially when you're talking about like, when is the best time to go looking for a Sasquatch? When do we think their like migration patterns are, if they have any at all? When are they more active? Things like that. It can get a little tricky. So the way I like to kind of approach this is say, well, the most reports have happened in the summer and fall, for sure. I found that there is a statistically significant difference in the amount of reports that get reported during the summer and fall versus the winter and spring. So I don't know why that is. It does line up with other North American predator habits and migratory patterns. And so potentially it is showing us that Sasquatches are following those trends because, food sources become more readily available in the summer and the fall. Breeding seasons pick up in the late summer and the fall. So potentially that's pointing towards that. So I guess I would say the summer and fall are the best times. I think October had the most Class A sighting reports, if I'm remembering correctly, followed by July. But yeah, July I'm not really sure about though, because quite a few of the reports are around that July 4th weekend where people are going to be outside camping more, just outside in general. So I'm not really sure if that's more of like a Sasquatch thing or a human thing. But yeah, I'll say like at least for months or seasons, the summer and fall have the most reports reported.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Well, in July, I guess that can make sense if you got people hiking or camping outdoors for the 4th or doing things outdoors. You've got to have, like they say, you've got to have a Sasquatch. You've got to have a person there to see it and then report it,
Yep.
So That makes total sense. And that kind of leads, the sightings or encounter leads into this part too, the vocalizations. And I've got a vocalization. I'm not able to play it, today, but I'll let you listen to it, here in the near future, of a close neighbor that, to me, it's no doubt in my mind what it is, but he got it. He recorded it about 2 a.m. He went outside because he couldn't sleep on his front porch, to, I guess, get some air or whatever. And when he walked out there, he heard something, and it was a growl, like a deep growl, and then howls. But I'm not going to get into detail about that, but it was sent off to 2 different people. R. Scott Nelson, I'm not sure if you're familiar with him. He used to be a cryptologic linguist for the Navy for about 20 or 25 years. I met him and sent it to him, and he said it was no known forest creature. But I guess what I'm going back to is it was 2 or 3 a.m. when my neighbor recorded this. So can you elaborate a little bit on your research on the vocalizations, and what do you think's the best time to hear one?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would love to hear that piece of audio. I'm really interested in audio. I spent 3 months in Georgia last year, and I kind of did like an audio project where I recorded every single night that I was there, and then went through all the audio to try and pick out weird noises. But yeah, so with the Sasquatch Data Project dataset, I have found that the majority of vocalization reports have occurred between the times of 8 p.m. and 6 a.m. And there are particular peaks, I think it's around like 11 p.m. and then also 2 to 3 a.m., which is pretty interesting because especially with these like really late times, like 2 to 4 a.m., probably the least amount of people are going to be out during those times. So the fact that we do have this increase in vocalization reports during those times is particularly interesting. But I will say, like, with these reports, I do have to be a little cautious with how I approach it because most of them don't have an actual clip of audio associated with them to actually hear or go look at the spectrogram or anything. So we just kind of have to have faith that
Right.
like the witness correctly identified the noise. But I guess at least for unidentified vocalizations that witnesses report, during the night is definitely the peak. Like that's where the majority of them happen.
Sure, that makes sense. Yeah, I'll send you this clip or audio clip today, so you can listen to it because it's really interesting, and it lasts for probably maybe a minute total.
Oh wow!
All of the action. So, but yeah, let me ask you this: kind of transition away from the vocalizations. Do you enjoy going to locations of reports and doing investigations or checking out the area?
So I love hiking and I love just being outside. Unfortunately, I don't really live in a great place to do Sasquatch research. I live in a pretty like populated area and the reports are very sparse. But I do enjoy going out to locations where I do think activity has occurred. My parents have a farm in Northeast Georgia, and looking back on my childhood, I feel pretty confident that at least at some point, Sasquatches were on our property just based on some weird things that I've had happened. And it's also great, like a great environment for them to be in. They have everything they need. So when I do get to go home and visit my parents, I love being out in the woods. I'm out there pretty much the whole time I'm visiting. But yeah, if I could somehow get involved in more field work, I would really enjoy that.
Right. Yeah, that area of North Georgia is just beautiful. It's if some of the listeners have never been or know about the area. It's heavily wooded, lots of water, mountainous in some areas, and lots of food and cover for something like that to migrate.
Absolutely. Yeah. And there have been some really great, like Class A sightings of Sasquatches really close to where my parents live. There's just plenty of space, like you said, plenty of food, plenty of places for them to be there. It is a beautiful part of the country for sure.
Right. Yes. Yeah. There's something that had caught my eye on your one of your posts, and it kind of surprised me. And I know we were just talking about encounters, but I would have thought that road crossings would be the most, I guess, the highest percentage of seeing a Sasquatch. Is that not correct, or am I? Going into this, I would have thought so too, with the way that pretty much the whole Sasquatch community talks about road crossings. And at least as they're reported, they are not. That's not typically, that's not the most common report that I get. I haven't run stats on this particular thing, like what kind of encounters people are having. I haven't run stats on that in a hot minute. So those numbers might be a little outdated. But yeah, typically it's people's like residential reports. I've been parsing a lot of those, and I don't know if it's because of the state that I'm looking at right now, which is West Virginia, or if that's just, they're just coming into people's yards more. But yeah, I'm actually surprised that road crossings are not the most commonly reported encounter type, because they get talked about all the time, I feel like. Right. Yeah, that really surprised me. It seems like, to me, it gets talked about more than anything else. Let me ask you this: What do you think the population of Sasquatches are across the United States? If you just had to guess.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I've read, I think the BFRO has estimated like 2,000 to 6,000. And I'm pulling these numbers out of like the depths of my brain, so forgive me if I'm wrong.
No problem.
I'm pretty sure that I've heard fairly recently, within the last year or 2 years, that the new estimate that's kind of accepted is like 6,000 to 12,000. I'm honestly not sure. I haven't done any calculations or anything to try and come up like with my own number. 6,000 to 12,000, at least just based off of pure speculation, seems more reasonable to me than 2,000 to 6,000, just purely off the number of reports and also, the size of the population that you would need, or the size of the population you would need to sustain it, right? Like you need a certain amount of genetic diversity to keep the species going. So, I tend to agree with like the 6,000 to 12,000 estimate, but I haven't personally run numbers on this.
Right. Yeah, that seems more logical to me than the 2 to 6. And there's so many acres of national forest and state forest and land that has just all across the United States, that have not, and a lot of it, never have a foot has stepped on it. I don't believe. And, for a skeptic, they would think if you said, 6 to 12,000, that's a lot. But it's really not, for the millions and millions, hundreds of millions of acres there are in the United States. Let me ask you this. What would you say to a skeptic that doesn't believe?
In regard to like population size or just?
Well, just in general, what would you say to them that, hey, this creature does exist or it doesn't exist?
Yeah. So, this is something I do quite a few live streams on TikTok. And this is one of the the things that I probably deal with the most, like on TikTok in general, is people telling me, like Sasquatches aren't real and this is crazy. But every once in a while I get like the open-minded skeptic, and I always appreciate the open-minded skeptics because they keep me grounded. But they're like, I don't think this is real, but this is also really interesting. So typically what I say is like, at least from my perspective, I'm so deep into the numbers and the data part of it. I say, there's patterns in the data that would be nearly impossible to hoax. I've been running statistical significance testing on these different traits, and the probabilities that all of these traits in these reports would line up in this way and in these patterns that we can relate to known animal species in North America, like the probability that would happen is far less than 1%. And I'm actually working on a paper like talking about this exact thing, like the probability that these things would be lining up in these patterns if the reports were hoaxed, or if it was all random chance from people just reporting basically like just nonsense, I guess, just hoaxing. But like the chances that we would be seeing these patterns in the data is just so incredibly small. So that's one of the most powerful things for me, I think, about the research that I'm doing is like, you really can't make this stuff up. Like you can't make up these patterns over decades of witness reports. And it's just,
right.
That's one of the most compelling things to me, at least.
Sure. Yeah. When you get through that with that paper, I would love to read that, because I have friends that are skeptics. I have family members, of course, that are skeptics too, and just kind of poke fun at me, for doing this. But, there's, matter of fact, yesterday or the day before, I was going over one report, and I believe it was one of the reports I was telling you about, the white-haired, bipedal creature. It happened in 1975, and they did not report it. One of the reports was not until 1999, and the other, I believe, 2014. So they waited, one of them waited nearly 40 years, and the other waited, 15, no more than that, 25, almost 25 years. So people that do that are not out to look, to me, are not out looking for attention, or, a way to make money, or to become popular, or to have clicks, or views, or whatever. That just usually tells me that they're telling the truth.
Yeah, for sure. And, most of these reports that I go through and look at, I mean, these people, they're just not, they're not wanting attention. They're not wanting anything from it. They just want someone to listen to their experience and kind of validate what they had happen to them. And it's pretty apparent, especially by the language that they use in the reports, and the information they don't want put out into the report, because they don't want they don't want anyone knowing who they are, or where they live, or anything. So, I'll definitely get you a copy of that paper, because I'm trying to use like traits and patterns that I'm seeing that are very easily related to other, especially like predators, other North American predators, and their patterns and traits that they have. So yeah, I'll definitely get you that paper, and it's just extremely unlikely
yeah.
like that all of this is just fake, and there's too much physical evidence too. Like I'm purely on the side of things that Sasquatches are real, and I'm just trying to learn about them through the data, but I also want part of my research to go out to the skeptics and be like, look at all of this, look at all these numbers and
right.
Tell me what you think about that.
Speaking of physical evidence, tell us a little bit about your cast collection that you have.
Yeah, so I have a small but mighty footprint cast collection. I've gotten all of them from the North American Bigfoot Center. I really love the footprint casts because I just think they're so interesting. I love the casts where you can see the movement in the toes. I'm like particularly interested in the the toes of the Sasquatch and like how they move. I have Grace Harbor cast. I have a few of the casts. I have 3 casts from the trackway that Jeff Meldrum originally casted back in 1996. They're replicas, but
is that the long trackway, or say long? Was it the one? Okay,
that's the one where he met up with Freeman, and he was like, "Yeah, I actually found a trackway this morning," and Jeff was like, "There's no way, there's no way." And they went out there, and sure enough, there they were in the ground. But those are
that's
really
pretty cool.
Yeah, those are like super interesting because you can see the differences in each foot and how it interacted with the ground. Like, because, there's multiple left feet casts that were taken and right foot casts and such. So you can actually see how the toes are moving differently in the mud. 2 of them are half casts, so they're not even the whole foot. And you can really see how much they vary, like cast to cast, and like the slipping in the mud. And I don't know, that's really interesting to me and very compelling because like that's so difficult. That would be just so difficult to hoax.
Oh, exactly. It's not, I don't see how that would be, anybody could see that. That would be a wooden print, or, a wooden cutout, or a plastic cutout, or whatever. There's just, when you have something like that that's has so many different characteristics to it, it's hard to say that, hey, that's a hoax. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Let me ask you this as well. There's various camps: flesh and blood, interdimensional, supernatural. What's your opinion? What do you think is flesh and blood, or what? Where do you stand on that?
I'm purely on the side that we're dealing with just an ape. They're just an animal. And, I have not seen, I like to think of myself as pretty open-minded because I really like to explore whatever avenue is opened up. So if I'm wrong down the line, that's totally fine. But right now I'm completely in the camp that they are just an ape. They're just animals. Everything that I've read and analyzed and the patterns in the data that I'm seeing, it just lines up perfectly with them being an ape, just an animal. They're doing normal animal predator things and behaving like we would expect just a normal predator to behave. So yeah, I'm purely on the animal side of things. But if I'm wrong, then
sure.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I'm in the same camp with you. I agree. It's just undiscovered primate, or it hasn't been recognized. So I totally agree with that. Lots of like you said earlier, there's lots of physical evidence and other things, witness reports, and so many of them that it is definitely to me, flesh and blood. All right, we do this at the end of the podcast. We have a Q&A, rapid fire, 3 questions. I'm going to ask you, and just whatever comes to your mind first. All right, you ready?
I'm ready.
There we go. All right, favorite movie?
Oh, God, my brain just went blank. Oh, man, Captain America.
Awesome. Okay. You like Marvels. Okay. The Marvel comics. Yep. All right. If you had one place you could do a Bigfoot expedition, where would it be?
Somewhere in West Virginia.
Oh, cool. Yeah. There's lots of stuff that goes on up there.
Yeah. I really enjoyed going through reports, and it's just it's a cool place.
Yes, no doubt. Part of the Appalachian Mountains. Okay, last one. Favorite Bigfoot show? And I think I know the answer to this. Past or present?
Oh, Finding Bigfoot for sure.
Gotcha. Okay, I'm with you there. No doubt. Well, Terrestrial, I've really enjoyed this, and I appreciate you coming on the show.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate you inviting me on, and I had a great time.
Yeah, this has been really interesting, and learned a lot of stuff. And what I'll do, I'll put a link at the bottom with your
YouTube channel link at the bottom of my description on this episode, and that way people can find you and check out what's going on and what you're doing, and learn some stuff, especially skeptics. Cool.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, I'm trying to get more active on YouTube. I seem to post the most on Instagram and TikTok, but all of my handles are at Sasquatch Data. But yeah, I definitely like to take a data-driven approach and, just let the numbers guide me.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I'll put those, I'll get those from you, and I'll put those at the bottom of the description in the YouTube channel, so everybody can check it out and see what's going on. And if you've had an encounter or an experience or something unexplainable, shoot me an email with your contact information at the Cryptid Crew Podcast at gmail.com. Thank you for listening. Like, share, and subscribe, and God bless.